Thanks, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're sitting right now. I'm Nicole DiCrepio. I'm the director for the North Central and Northwest Climate Adaptation Science Centers. I'm actually located in Corvallis, Oregon, so it is morning for me. We're going to be talking today, presenting some information to you about the Climate Adaptation Science Center Network Federal Fiscal Year 2022 funding opportunity. And that opportunity was just released last week, but I'm really pleased to see that it's already making its way around because we've got a lot of folks on this Zoom already. So that's great, and keep spreading the word around if you don't mind. That would be great. Next slide, Holly. We just want to remind people or let people know this presentation is being recorded. So, you know, adjust your names and pictures accordingly. But we will not be recording the Q&A portion of the webinar. That'll happen in the second half of the hour. So, and like I said, do please add your questions to the chat, and then we'll allow people to go off mute later on for more specific questions. Next slide. So let me just jump right into it. I want to give you a little bit of background about the Climate Adaptation Science Center Network. Many of you, hopefully a lot of you are familiar with us, but I'm guessing that not everyone is. So you're going to hear me use the acronym CASC, Climate Adaptation Science Center Network. I'll be saying CASC for the remainder of the presentation. So the CASCs, we are a federal university partnership, and I'll explain a little bit more about what that looks like in a second. But our mission is to deliver science to help fish, wildlife, water, land, and people adapt to a changing climate. We're very much focused on impacts and adaptation. And our maybe our three sort of core ways of going about this is we're really concerned about helping resource managers, that's natural and cultural resource managers, protect our public lands and natural resources. And so we do that by engaging with partners across the nation to figure out what their biggest climate adaptation challenges and priorities are, and those help us create and set our science priorities in each of our regions. We collaborate very intentionally and frequently with tribes and indigenous communities to help prepare for climate risks and help support tribal climate resilience efforts. We take that very seriously. And we also are really committed to building capacity by training students, scientists, and managers in what we call actionable science, stakeholder engaged science. It's a science approach that the CASCs really seek to support. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. Next slide, please. So what we look like, so I've already mentioned that we've got different regions. So the CASC network is made up of a series of regions. We have 9 regions, and then we also have a national Climate Adaptation Science Center located outside of Washington, D.C. As I mentioned, we're university federal partnerships. So on the federal side, we are run out of the U.S. Geological Survey, which is a bureau of the Department of the Interior. So when you hear us or you see in our statements, our funding opportunity document that we are interested in helping Department of the Interior bureaus with their management needs, you understand that's where we're located. We're situated within the Department of Interior. So we're very interior focused. We also have the other side of the house is our university partnership, and each of the regional CASCs is hosted by a university in that region. And then there's a consortium of schools or other organizations that make up that kind of regional university consortium. So this is important because you're going to want to know where you fall, which of these CASC regions you're going to be applying to. So, right, you might sit in the Northeast, but your work takes place in the South Central. So you can see the boundaries that we work by here on this map. And then you can also see the universities, the host universities, and the other consortium members for each region. We'll get into eligibility requirements in just a moment about how this plays out in terms of who can apply for our funding. And then I also want to point out that the Midwest CASC is a newly formed CASC. That one used to be just part of the Northeast, but that has now been separated out. So the Midwest CASC does not yet have a university host. So that's why you don't see any schools listed there. And so if you have specific questions about working in the Midwest, you can join the Midwest webinar, which is later. Sorry, I don't know the exact date. Someone might be able to put that in the chat. Olivia probably can. Thanks, Olivia. Thursday at 1 p.m. Central Time to learn more about how eligibility requirements for the Midwest will work. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's a really quick overview of sort of the CASC network, and we'll dive into the funding opportunity itself. These are the basics. Across the regions, the CASCs anticipate awarding about $10 million in fiscal year 2022. Now, that's all very contingent on congressional appropriations, but that's the number that we're working with currently. And it averages out to about $1 million, maybe $1.5 million per region. The funding is available for scientific research and activities that address high priority natural or cultural resource management issues that can benefit from climate informed planning and adaptation management. So again, we're really interested in work that has a specific management application, can be used to inform management plans, or in some other way is very explicitly tied to climate adaptation. So that has to be very clear in your statements of interest and the full proposals. Right now, which CASC regions are participating? In this particular call, we're all participating. This is a coordinated network effort. So every region is participating in this funding opportunity. There is no specific call for national level projects or projects coming out of the national office at this time, but we often coordinate across regions. So if you have a project that spans multiple regions, we definitely are interested in those and would like to talk to you further. And we'll have you reach out to one of the regions that you're working in, and we can sort of coordinate how we would like you to apply. Next slide. So eligible applicants. For the CASC network, we have some very specific eligibility requirements. Each proposal or statement of interest must have a research principal investigator from one of these eligible organizations, and those include USGS science centers and other units, so any USGS field station, laboratory, cooperative research unit, etc. So basically anyone from USGS can apply. And then the second large category of eligible applicants are PIs from within the CASC, the regional CASC consortium network. So again, if you're located at one of the CASC host universities or consortium universities, you're eligible to apply directly to this funding opportunity. Now, parties from other organizations, whether they be federal, state, tribal, NGO, or other, may participate in CASC funded projects and receive funds, but those will be via subawards or contracts or potentially interagency agreements through an eligible organization as described up above. And so I know this part can be a bit confusing. So if you do have specific questions about whether or not you're eligible, please, like I said, put them in the chat, and I can see some questions already. So can grad students be the PI from a CASC consortium university? So in that case, that would depend on your university. It's up to your university as to whether you can be a PI. We don't determine that on the federal side. That's determined at the university side. So if your university is okay with it, then we're okay with it. Okay, I expect we'll get more questions about that as we go, but for now, we'll move to the next slide. The really important information, the timeline. So this was just this opportunity was just released last week. Statements of interest are due on March 19th at 5 p.m. That's Eastern Daylight Time. So just make note of that for folks that are in other time zones. That's a 5 p.m. Eastern deadline. Then what we'll do, the CASC network in each region will go through their particular review process. That review process varies from region to region, but our review teams will go through the statements of interest, and then we'll invite full proposals from some subset of those SOIs, and we plan to do that around April 22nd. Full proposals will then be due on July 23rd. Again, that's 5 p.m. Eastern time. And then we'll go through another round of reviews, make our final funding decisions, and send out notification of intent to award around September 8th. Again, that's roughly when we plan to be able to do that. So that's the schedule. Make note of that. And next slide, please. Here's where you can find all of your regional webinars. The Northwest webinar is later this afternoon, and most of these are this week. And then we start to get into next week with the Northeast and South Central webinars. It could be that we might need, if we are finding that we have a lot of inquiries, we might need to add a few more of these on, but we'll also be recording. I think each region is probably planning to record their regional webinars, so they'll be available for folks. And as I said, if you missed it at the beginning of the talk, these regional webinars will focus more on what those regional science priorities are and talk through the regional eligibility requirements. So they'll be useful from that perspective. Next slide. Okay, so the system that we use to manage all of the statements of interest and proposal packages is called RFP Manager. So you'll use this RFP Manager submission portal to submit your materials. We ask that you do start that application process early to avoid any last minute technical delays. I'm not going to lie, RFP Manager likes to give us problems when there's a lot of people trying to use it at the last minute, as a lot of these systems do. So do make sure that you start your process a little bit early to make sure you're not up against that very last second deadline. I think that's all I want to say about the, for each of the regional CASCs, you'll see a funding opportunity specific to that regional CASC. And so again, you'll go into that, click on that opportunity to apply. There is, and actually I'll invite one of my CASC colleagues to correct me if I'm wrong. Holly, you can correct me, but if you are applying to multiple CASCs, there's a button within the system that will allow you to identify which other CASCs you're applying to. And I see Holly shaking her head yes about that. So that will be the case within the system. You can indicate your intent to apply to multiple CASCs. Next slide. Okay, so that was really broadly high level kind of information about this. We do have some FAQs that we've developed, and we'll go through those in just a moment. But if you do want more information, here's the link for it. I'll ask one of my colleagues to put that link in the chat button so you can click on it directly. But we have a lot of details in the funding opportunity document. So you'll be able to hopefully find a lot of answers in there, especially a lot of very specific answers to budgeting questions, but what the budgets are supposed to look like. And again, kind of the pass through costs and whatnot.